I'm outside a glass-walled conference room at Hayes Bennett in downtown Seattle. Yesterday we buried the only man who ever showed up for me, my uncle, Rick Hayes. Today, the door opens, and the last two people I expected walk in, my parents. The ones who left me at 12 and never looked back. If you've ever had someone reappear only when money is on the line, you know the cold rush that hit my spine. They came smiling, but my uncle left something stronger than money. He left the truth. In writing, in audio, in video. What happened in that room wasn't a fight. It was a quiet plan my uncle built for years, and it ended with a kind of justice I didn't even know I wanted. Stay with me. I'll tell you how we got from a stranger's spare room in Ohio to the day my parents met the one thing they couldn't spin, receipts. The conference room is ready. Ms. Brooks, the receptionist says. Voice soft, like sound might crack me. I smooth the black dress I accidentally slept in and follow her past framed cityscapes of Seattle. The carpet swallows footsteps. My heartbeat doesn't. Inside, a long table, floor-to-ceiling windows, gray clouds hanging over Elliott Bay. Dana Morales, my uncle's attorney, stands at the head, calm, silver pen aligned with a leather folder. On one side sits Gloria Reyes, our housekeeper of 20 years, Jason Park, Campbell Tech CFO, Rick's right hand, and Lena Ortiz, Rick's executive assistant. This is the family you earn by showing up. The elevator chimes. They step out together like a memory I never ordered. Carl Brooks, softer jaw, more gray than I remember, wears a gold watch that wants to be real. Denise looks polished in a department store way, careful makeup, bright studs, smile that never reaches her eyes. Ava, she says, arms open. I don't move. Ethan shifts closer to me. He flew in last night, paint still faint on his cuticles. He's 3 years younger, but some part of me will always check if he's breathing right, like I did when we were kids in Dayton and his asthma flared in the cold. Dana steps forward. Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, thank you for coming. Please take a seat. We'll follow Mr. Hayes's written instructions exactly. They sit across from us. My father leans back like good news belongs to him. Shame about Rick, he says to no one. Family's family. Ethan makes a sound that isn't a laugh. I lace my fingers together to stop the shake. Outside, a ferry horn carries across the water. For a second I'm 12 again, counting sirens in a stranger's spare room, trying to guess if anyone is coming back for us. The room tilts. I breathe. I didn't come to argue. I came to listen. Dana opens the leather folder. Formal words first, sound mind. Witnesses. Revocation of prior wills. Gifts to charity. Scholarships for foster youth. Community clinics. Art programs. Gloria dabs at her eyes when she hears about the lakeside cottage and the retirement fund. Jason stares at his hands when Dana says bonus, like he doesn't trust his face. I wait for the part that will hurt. And now, Dana says, looking at the two people who taught me what a boundary is by crossing every one, to the matter of Carl and Denise Brooks. My father sits up. My mother's fingers knot together, knuckles whitening. To Carl and Denise, Dana reads, voice even. I leave the sum of $1 each, and a letter to be read aloud in the presence of my children. The room goes quiet in the important way. My father's mouth opens, then closes. You're kidding, he says, heat under his aftershave. Dana doesn't respond. She breaks a smaller seal, unfolds pages, and begins. Carl, Denise, if you're hearing this, it means you did exactly what I knew you would do. The first line lands like a gavel. My mother makes a small sound. Ethan's knee bumps mine under the table. You reappeared when money called your name. Dana continues. Reading Rick's words. You did not reappear when they were hungry. You did not reappear when she slept in a strange house, counting her brother's breaths in the dark. But you came today. My father tries to cut in. Dana lifts a palm. You'll have a chance to respond when the letter is finished. Dates, times, messages, recorded, documented, kept. 13 attempts. Extortion. In the early years I paid once, not for you, but for their peace, and I kept every receipt. Something loosens in my chest. Not relief. Not yet. More like a window opening in a room I thought was sealed. Dana clicks a remote. A screen lowers. The hum of a projector fills the space. Then, my father's face. A decade younger. Lit by a motel lamp. 50 grand is pocket change. Rick. He slurs to camera. Don't make me tell her how you really got those kids. Cut. My mother. Different hair. Smooth voice. We could fight you. She purrs at someone off screen. We could say you took them. Why not wire the money like before? The room doesn't breathe. Ethan covers his mouth. Eyes wet. The screen goes dark. Dana returns to the letter. All of this evidence has been forwarded to the appropriate authorities this morning. I did not do this to punish you. I did it because my kids deserve the full truth, without your edits. She sets the pages down. Air feels thin, like a storm took some of the oxygen. No one speaks. A phone rings somewhere down the hall, then stops. In the glass, I catch my reflection, same eyes I had at 12. Only steadier. I didn't come for a fight. I came to hear my uncle tell the truth, one last time.
Dayton, Ohio, was a patchwork of cracked sidewalks and corner stores. Our apartment sat above a nail salon that smelled like acetone year-round. In winter, the radiators hissed like angry cats. In summer, box fans pushed hot air around like it was a favor. We had one bedroom. Ethan and I shared a pullout in the living room. If his asthma was calm, I slept on the edge. One leg on the floor so the mattress wouldn't fold up and swallow us. If he wheezed, I kept a hand on his back and counted breaths. It made him feel safe. It made me feel useful. Carl, my dad, worked when work found him, roofing in spring, drywall in fall. His real routine was betting slips and big ideas. Payday meant 2 stops, the check cashing window and the back booth at Murphy's. Some nights he came home loud and generous, tossing a crumpled 20 onto the table like a hero. Pizza, kids, best in the city. Other nights he walked in with quiet eyes and a smell like cheap whiskey. Those were the nights the plates stayed in the cabinet, and we spoke like people in a library. Denise, my mom, was beautiful in a way that felt careful. She worked the cosmetics counter at the mall and knew how to build a face out of samples. She studied glossy magazines like they were maps to a life she'd misplaced. I could have been somebody, she'd say, flipping past perfume ads, if I hadn't been tied down so young. Bills piled up on the microwave, red stamps, due dates, phone numbers with long wait times. I learned early which ones could be late and which ones turned the lights off. I learned how to stretch a jar of peanut butter into a week, how to make pasta seem like dinner if you stirred in a spoon of butter and hope. We had our own signals. If Carl whistled on the stairs, good mood. If the keys scraped the lock 3 times, not good. If Denise turned the TV up loud during the news, it meant they were talking in the kitchen and didn't want us to hear. Ethan and I did our homework at the chipped coffee table, pencils marching, eyes on the paper. Quiet was a kind of protection. School felt like a different planet. The cafeteria was loud and warm and smelled like canned peaches. I loved it. I loved the rules most of all: lines, bells, grades, boxes to check. Mrs. Patel in 5th grade kept extra milk in the teacher fridge and pretended she'd accidentally grabbed too many. "Help me out, Ava," she'd say, slipping one to me like a secret. I said thank you without making it a big deal. That's another thing you learn, how to accept kindness in a way that doesn't embarrass the giver. On my 12th birthday, I didn't tell anyone. Birthdays are loud. I needed the week to be quiet. But when I opened my backpack at night, I found a folded paper crown and a fun-sized chocolate. Ethan had traded his best eraser to a kid in art class to get it. He'd drawn tiny balloons on the crown with a dull pencil. "Make a wish," he said, face serious. I wished for air that didn't sound like a whistle when he slept. Sometimes Uncle Rick called on Sundays. Back then he was just Rick, Carl's older brother with a voice that sounded like he'd had media training. He asked about school like he meant it. He asked about Ethan's inhaler, spelled the brand name back to me, then asked if we had refills. When he offered help, Carl would get stiff. "We're fine," he'd snap after hanging up. "He thinks money makes him better than me." Then he'd look at me like I'd agreed with Rick just by listening. I learned to hold two truths at once. My parents loved the idea of us, and we were heavy to carry. Some nights Denise would touch my hair and say, "You got my cheekbones. Use them." Other nights she'd sigh at the sink and say, "If I hadn't had kids, I'd be in LA by now." When the eviction notices started, the tape lost its stick from being pulled off and put back on. The lights went out once, then twice. The fridge was a museum of condiments. Ethan's coughs lasted longer. I sold candy bars for a school fundraiser and used my own prize points to pick the grocery gift card instead of the speaker everyone wanted. I told myself it was strategy, not pity. Strategy keeps your head up. A Thursday in October looked normal until it didn't. Denise packed our duffels with neat hands. Carl said we were visiting friends for the weekend. "Fresh air," he said. "Too bright. You'll love it." He hugged us both like he was already saying goodbye. On the bus out of Dayton, I watched brick give way to trees. Denise smelled like the fancy samples she pocketed from work. Carl stared out the window and pretended sleep. I tried to read his face in the reflection and found only clouds. I should have known the shape of an ending, but 12 is a forgiving number. You believe what you're told until the sirens in your chest are louder than the ones in the street. The day we disappeared from our old life started like any other Thursday. I packed my backpack, checked Ethan's inhaler, and counted the change in the snack jar. After school, Mom was suddenly warm and efficient. She folded clothes into 2 duffels and told us we were taking a weekend trip. "Fresh air," she said, voice too light. Dad nodded along, eyes on the door. We took the evening bus out of Dayton. Brick gave way to fields. Small towns slid past their dark storefronts. Mom smelled like a new perfume from the mall, sharp and floral, and kept smoothing my hair like she had a checklist: bag, jacket, daughter. We got off in a town I didn't know, a place where the streetlights hummed and the sidewalks were clean. A woman waited on a small porch with a rake leaned beside her steps. "This is Mrs. Whitaker," Dad said. "Old family friend." She smiled, tight and polite. Inside, the house was neat. Plastic covers on the sofa, a bowl of wrapped candies no one touched. We ate spaghetti with Jared sauce in silence. After dinner, Mom reapplied lipstick by the hall mirror. Dad checked his watch. "We're grabbing groceries," she said. "Back soon." They didn't come back. Ethan fell asleep on a rollaway bed in the spare room, my hand on his back counting his breaths. I watched headlights crawl along the bedroom wall and waited for a car to stop. It never did. In the morning, both phone numbers we had for them were no longer in service. Mrs. Whitaker kept me busy with dishes and laundry. By evening, Ethan had a low fever, the start of a wheeze. She finally called a local doctor, who brought an emergency inhaler and spoke to me like the only adult in the room. I asked where my parents were. Mrs. Whitaker stared at her hands and said she didn't know. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope with my name. Inside was a single page in my mother's handwriting. "Ava and Ethan, you deserve better than we can give. Do not try to find us. This is for the best." The words felt like a trap that had snapped shut days earlier. I wanted to be angry, but all I could feel was empty. By afternoon, Mrs. Whitaker called the police. Then came clipboards, questions, and a quiet car ride to a county office where the walls had posters about safety and smiles. A social worker separated us and asked if anyone had hurt us physically. No. If I knew where my parents might go. No. If we had other family. My uncle. I said. Rick Hayes. He lives in Washington. The worst moment came the next day. You'll be placed in separate foster homes. Ethan gripped my arm. You can't. I said. He needs me. They were kind, but they didn't change their plan. I watched my brother's face disappear behind a car window, his palm pressed to the glass, fogging a small circle that faded as the car turned the corner. That night in a county group home, I lay on a top bunk that smelled like bleach and old soap and tried to believe in the sentence. We'll figure this out. I didn't know how. I only knew I had to. The group home was a converted school building with long hallways and bulletin boards that still had faded borders from old holidays. The staff spoke in warm, practiced tones. They called me sweetie and offered choices, spaghetti or chicken, card games or TV. I chose silence and kept my backpack under my pillow. Days blurred. I ate because someone was watching. I showered when they told me it was my turn. I kept the book Uncle Rick had given me years ago, Women Who Invented Things, inside the pillowcase and ran my thumb along the bent corner of the first chapter. It felt like a handle on a door I couldn't yet open. Ms. Carter, the social worker assigned to me, visited every day. She sat in the plastic chair beside my bunk with a clipboard she rarely wrote on. Ava, she'd say, tell me one true thing about today. Some days I said, the milk was cold. Other days I said nothing and she said, that counts too. On the 6th day, she mentioned she was trying to reach my uncle. The name lit up something in me. Did you find him? I asked, voice rough from not using it enough. Almost, she said. He's traveling for work. The next morning, I sat on the edge of my bed, shoelaces untied, waiting before I remembered how to finish the knot. On day 9, Ms. Carter came in with a small smile. We reached Mr. Hayes, she said. He's flying in. I didn't know if I wanted to see him. I didn't know if he knew the worst parts. I didn't know if he'd look at me and see a problem he couldn't solve. But when he walked into the director's office, tie crooked, eyes red like he hadn't slept, I stood up before I knew I'd moved. Ava, he said. Not loudly, not dramatically, like he'd been saying my name all week in every airport and hotel lobby. He kneeled more awkwardly than gracefully, the way people do when they're not used to it but don't care how it looks. I surprised both of us by crying first. He put a hand on my shoulder and kept it there long enough that my breathing found a rhythm again. The meeting was complicated. There were words like jurisdiction, temporary custody, and home study. He didn't flinch at any of it. He asked where Ethan was. He asked when we could see him. He asked what I needed now. That afternoon he rented a small apartment 2 blocks from the group home. He brought me a warm coat and hair ties and a notebook with outlines. So you can draw or write or both, he said, like it was normal to get both. 3 weeks after I arrived, a judge signed a paper and I walked out the front door with Uncle Rick. We ate soup in a diner where the waitress called him Han and pushed extra crackers our way. He talked to me like I was a person worth planning around. When we flew to Seattle the next day, I stared out the window as the ground turned to clouds, then back to ground again, and tried to believe that a different life could exist on the other side of that landing. Rick's house sat on a tree-lined street where every front yard looked like it had been measured. The security gate clicked open silently. Inside, the air smelled like lemons and something clean I couldn't name. A woman with kind eyes, Gloria, handed me a mug of cocoa and told me to call her if I couldn't sleep. My room was bigger than our whole apartment had been. There was a bed with a headboard, a desk that didn't wobble, and a closet with clothes already in my size. The decorator guessed, Rick said, shifting his weight like the floor might give feedback. We can return anything, or everything. That night I slept badly. Quiet has its own noise when you're not used to it. I woke from a dream where I'd lost Ethan in a store and couldn't remember what he was wearing. At 2 a.m., I padded downstairs. Rick was in his office on the phone, papers spread out like a map. He ended the call when he saw me. "Can't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head. He made tea and didn't add questions. We sat in a comfortable hush while the heater clicked. Rick wasn't a natural parent. He respected rules and time blocks more than feelings, at least at first. He printed a simple house schedule and taped it to the fridge. Breakfast by 7:30. Homework after school. Sunday dinner, no phones. He set expectations and kept them. It felt like stepping onto a sidewalk after years of walking in mud. School was an uphill start. He enrolled me in a private academy where kids had lunch accounts and weekend plans that included mountains. I had a thrift store uniform and a practiced way of keeping my head down. The counselor matched me with a soft-voice therapist, Dr. Klein, who taught me a sentence I still use: "What happened to you is not who you are." On Fridays, Rick drove me to see an attorney who explained the long path to reunite siblings across state lines. It was not a movie montage. It was paperwork, phone calls, home studies, and patience. Rick hired the best people he could find, then showed up for the slow parts too. He also started small rituals that made normal feel possible. Saturday mornings, we'd go to the farmer's market and he'd let me pick one thing we couldn't name and then look up how to cook it. On Tuesdays, he taught me how to track a budget using a simple spreadsheet, lines of numbers that somehow made the future feel less random. When letters came, from Ethan's caseworker, from a foster family in Columbus sending updates, Rick read them with me. "Not to me. We're going to get him home," he said. Not like a promise he couldn't keep, but like a goal with a plan. The first time we had a supervised visit with Ethan, it was in a beige room with toys no one played with. He'd grown taller, face thinner, eyes older. He launched into my arms and I counted his breaths out of habit. "We're okay," I told him. "We're going to be okay." Across the room, Rick talked to the social worker with a steady voice and took notes like he was in a meeting that mattered, which it was. Seattle's weather matched my mood for months, gray with occasional, startling light. At school, kids compared ski passes and summer camps. I learned the bus routes, the library hours, and which teachers posted notes online so I could read twice before answering once. Nightmares came in clusters. I'd wake convinced Ethan was wheezing in the dark, or that our mother had come back and I didn't know if I should hug her or bolt the door. After the 4th week of bad sleep, Rick moved my therapy to twice a week and asked if I wanted a small lamp left on at night. He didn't make it a moral issue. It was just a setting we could adjust. He read parenting books and highlighted them like trade manuals. He wasn't suddenly warm or gushy. He was steady. When I blew up at a teacher for calling on me while I was drawing a breath, he didn't lecture. He asked me to walk him through the spike, what I felt 3 seconds before I snapped. Then he asked what would help me next time. When I said, "I don't know," he said, "Let's find out." Sundays became the anchor. We cooked. Sometimes it was edible, sometimes not. He told me about his job in terms I could understand. We help companies lock their digital doors. He explained why backups matter and how to think about risk like a set of dials you can turn, not a monster you can't see. On the first day it snowed. He texted Dr. Klein to ask if I should miss school and just have a win. She said yes. We walked around Green Lake and talked about nothing important. It still felt important. I realized later that this was one of Rick's quiet skills. He made space for the day to be good without announcing that's what he was doing. The process to bring Ethan home was slow. We visited him under supervision, then at a park, then for a Saturday in Columbus, then a weekend. Rick never complained about flights or forms. He'd lean against a doorway while Ethan showed him a drawing and ask real questions about the colors and the lines, not just say "good job." When the first judge said we'd need more time, I went cold and quiet, the old fog creeping in. Rick let me feel it without letting me drown in it. "More time doesn't mean never," he said. "It means not yet. We can work with not yet. I started sleeping through the night more often. I joined the debate team because the rules were clear and the arguments had a start and an end. I kept the Book of Women Inventors in my backpack, not because I needed it for class, but because it reminded me the mind is a tool that no one can take from you if you keep sharpening it. Rick wanted me to see work up close. The summer I turned 15, he got me an entry-level job at his company, Mailroom First. No special treatment. Everyone's job matters, he said. And then he proved he meant it by knowing the names of the janitorial staff and the favorite snacks of the receptionist. I rotated through departments. Customer support taught me to listen until people's anger ran out of fuel. Accounting taught me that numbers tell stories if you ask the right questions. The operations team taught me checklists can save lives, or at least Saturday nights. At home, we kept Sundays sacred. We invited Gloria and her sister sometimes. Ethan's caseworker joined once and ended up staying an extra hour because the dessert failed and we turned it into a game of who could rescue a broken cake with pantry items. Answer: no one. We ordered ice cream. Rick didn't push grades or colleges. He pushed curiosity and systems. When I brought him a news clipping about a data breach at a small business, he didn't lecture. He asked, "If you were the owner, what would you do tomorrow?" When I said, "Cry, then call you," he nodded. Good. And then, by the end of dinner, we had a simple checklist on a napkin: change passwords, notify customers, patch software, set up backups, schedule training. It didn't feel like he was grooming me for anything. It felt like he was teaching me to look at a mess and see the levers I could pull. 2 years in, a supervised visit with Ethan turned into an unsupervised weekend. He came home with us to Seattle and slept with a sketchbook under his pillow. His wheeze was softer. His laugh was louder. We visited the art museum and he stood too close to a painting and whispered, "How do they make light out of paint?" I didn't know, but I liked that his questions were getting bigger. We still didn't know when the court would allow a full move. Not yet hovered over everything. Rick stayed patient in public and restless in private. I caught him once on the back porch late at night, his hands on the railing, face turned toward the sound of a passing ferry. He saw me and smiled, then asked if I wanted hot chocolate. He was not a speech person. He was a cocoa person. The day the judge finally signed the order allowing Ethan to move to Seattle, the clerk slid the paper across the counter like it was any other sheet. For us, it was a door opening. Ethan's foster family in Columbus hugged us goodbye with a mix of sadness and relief. They'd been good to him. That made thanking them easy and leaving them hard. Back in Seattle, Rick had turned the sunroom into an art studio. North-facing windows, sturdy table, shelves with labeled bins, charcoal, acrylics, watercolor. Ethan walked in and said, "Is this all for me?" Rick said, "It's all for your work." And Ethan nodded like he understood the difference. Medical care was simple now. Inhalers on schedule, checkups on the calendar, fewer emergency moments. I stopped listening for his breathing at night and started listening for the soft scratch of pencil on paper. He drew late and woke up early, the way joy rearranges sleep. School placed him in an arts-focused program. He flourished in the way kids do when adults stop making survival the only subject. He brought home sketch after sketch: hands, windows, shoes, faces. He drew Rick once at the kitchen table with his sleeves rolled up, smiling without showing teeth. It looked exactly like him. Our home settled into the kind of routine I used to think was fictional. Chores, breakfast, inside jokes, monthly check-ins with Dr. Klein for me and an art mentor for Ethan. We argued about small things, which meant the big things were mostly okay. When Ethan won a regional student art award, Rick pretended he didn't know the dress code and showed up in a tie that didn't match anything he was wearing. He clapped like a man who has decided embarrassment isn't a useful category. We were a family, not the kind you're born with, but the kind that stays. Rick's diagnosis came on a bright day, the kind that made Seattle look like it had never heard of rain. He sat us down at the kitchen table and said the words like they were items on a list: pancreatic cancer, advanced, aggressive. Then he said the important part: we're going to keep living our life. He met with doctors and lawyers and his leadership team. He wrote things down. He recorded videos explaining processes no one else liked to do. He started handing off responsibilities at work, not because he was giving up, but because he was setting us up. He kept coaching us through practical things too: how to read a lease, how to pick an insurance plan, how to decide if a problem was urgent or just loud. He taught me to say, "Let me get back to you," when I needed time to think. Treatments were brutal. He lost weight. He moved slower, but he never stopped showing up. He came to Ethan's school show, sat in the aisle seat, and smiled at the student 2 rows down like she was his. 2. He timed his chemo around a project I was leading at his company, my first real one, building a small business security package. "You've got this," he said, and when I faltered, he didn't grab the wheel. He pointed at the map. He was with us longer than expected, long enough to see Ethan's portfolio accepted by a competitive program, long enough to see my team hit our first targets. He told us, often, and without drama, that loving us had been the best use of his years. When he died, it was on a clear morning with gulls crying over the bay. Ethan and I were there, one on each side, our hands on his. The house was terribly quiet in the hours after. Then Gloria came in the back door with cinnamon rolls, and we remembered how to eat and breathe and talk about the next hour, then the next. The church was full. Rick had been generous and fair in business, and the city showed up. Executives stood beside janitors. A barista from the corner shop brought flowers and cried harder than some of the CEOs. The mayor spoke. Ethan played a piece he had written, slow and clear, the sound of gratitude turning into air. I gave the eulogy and kept it simple. I said Rick had shown me what showing up looked like. I said he taught me to read contracts and recipes and people with the same attention. I said he had not saved us out of pity but out of love, and that love felt like stability more than fireworks. During the last hymn, 2 figures slipped in and stood at the back. I knew them instantly. With the same split feeling I'd had the day they left, love and fear canceling each other into numbness. Carl and Denise looked older, edges smoothed by time and hard living. They waited until the crowd thinned, then approached like they belonged. Denise reached for me. I stepped back. Ethan moved closer without me asking. "We need to talk," she said, performing sadness the way she used to perform beauty. "There's so much you don't understand," Carl added, glancing at the cameras like there'd be a press release. Dana Morales, Rick's attorney, appeared at my elbow as if she'd rehearsed the cue. "Mr. and Mrs. Brooks," she said, voice polite and final. "This is not the time. You will receive an invitation to the will reading. That is the appropriate place for family matters." The phrase landed with a weight I understood only later. They showed up for the will. Of course they did. If you follow the scent of money long enough, it leads you to rooms with polished tables and good lighting. They wore new clothes that looked like what they were, new clothes bought to look expensive. We went home to a quiet house and waited for Friday, which felt both too close and too far. I didn't sleep much. I stood in Rick's office and put my hand on the back of his chair and said, "I hope you left us a map." The room didn't answer, but I felt less alone in it. Hayes Bennett looked like a museum where people whispered and made decisions. We sat at a long table. Dana read the formal parts, then the gifts to charity, then the thank yous to the people who had held up Rick's world while he held up ours. I felt proud and small and grateful all at once. "And now, to Carl and Denise Brooks," Dana said. $1 each. She read, and a letter to be read aloud. Carl laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Cute," he said. "Real cute." Dana opened the letter and Rick's voice came into the room through his words. Calm, precise, hard as truth. "If you're hearing this, it means you did what I knew you would. You came back for money. You did not come back when they were cold, or hungry, or scared. You did not come back when she woke in a strange house in Ohio, counting her brother's breaths in the dark. But you came today. He listed dates. He referenced emails. He named the number of times they had contacted him to ask for money in exchange for silence, or threat, or the promise to fight. 13 attempts across 15 years. He wrote that in the early days. He paid once, not for them, but for our peace. He said he kept every receipt. Dana pressed a button and a screen lowered. The first video showed Carl in a motel room, the bedspreads patterned loud and tired. 50 grand is pocket change, he said, eyes red. Don't make me tell her how you really got those kids. The second clip was Denise in a different place in year, leaning toward the camera. Voice sugar slick, wire the money like before. We don't need to make this messy. Ethan made a small sound I'd never heard from him before, half laugh, half sob. I put my hand over his. Dana clicked the screen dark. All of this evidence, Rick's letter continued, has been provided to the appropriate authorities this morning. I am not doing this to punish you. I am doing it because my kids deserve the whole truth, without your edits. He apologized to us for not telling us earlier, said he believed then that the knowledge would only add pain. He wrote that any money they had extracted would be donated to organizations serving abandoned children, turning your greed into a shelter you never offered. Then came the rest of the will, everything else to us, split evenly, with specific instructions about how to steward what he'd built. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like being handed a set of keys and a maintenance schedule. Right on cue, as if the day itself had marks on a storyboard, 2 agents stepped in, crisp and quiet. Mr. and Mrs. Brooks. One said, "We'd like you to come with us to answer questions about several ongoing investigations." Carl blustered. Denise cried. The agents stayed calm. They left with the agents. The room exhaled. Dana closed the folder and looked at us. Not like a lawyer now, but like a woman who had just watched a family do something both terrible and necessary. "I'm sorry," she said, "and I'm glad the truth is not heavy on your side of the table." We didn't cheer. We didn't high-five. We sat in the quiet and drank the water someone had poured at the start of the meeting. The hallway outside hummed with normal office life. I could hear a laugh somewhere far away. It sounded like it came from a different planet. In the car, Ethan looked out the window the whole way home. At a stoplight, he said, "I thought I'd feel fixed." I said, "Me too." We let that be true without trying to make it better. Back at the house, I walked into Rick's office and stood behind his chair. I didn't sit in it. Some things you earn, some things you tend. I traced the grain of the desk with my finger and thought about how many letters had been written here that changed the direction of a day. Dana called later with practical next steps. There are always next steps. Estate logistics, company transitions, foundation paperwork. She spoke clearly and slowly, the way people do when they've decided not to let emotion run the whole show. We ate leftovers and watched a dumb show. We slept badly and then better. The relief came in installments. Like a payment plan, small deposits over months until the balance of dread finally dropped near zero. Grief kept its own calendar. I cried on Tuesdays for no reason. Ethan painted in shades of blue for weeks, then suddenly switched to oranges and didn't explain. Gloria watered plants, cooked too much food, and told us stories about Rick that made him alive in the room for 3 more minutes at a time. People asked what we were going to do now. We said, "Keep going." It was both non-answer and full plan. We knew how to do that part. 3 months after the will reading, I filed paperwork to start the Hayes Foundation for Sibling Reunification. It was a long name for a simple mission: help brothers and sisters separated by the system find each other and, when possible, come back together sooner. We took seed money from the estate and added the amounts Rick had documented from those early extortion attempts. Turning that old, ugly pressure into something that would lift kids felt like changing the story mid-sentence. We hired 2 social workers who knew the maze from the inside. We created small grants for travel and legal fees. We set up a hotline staffed by people who would listen first and advise second. We found a storefront near a bus line and made it bright and warm and stocked with snacks you didn't have to ask for. The first family we helped was a teen girl and her 8-year-old brother who had been placed in towns 40 miles apart because that was where 2 beds were free. The county had a system. We had a car, gas cards, and free time on Saturdays. We brought them together twice a month while the adults moved slow papers. On the day the judge signed to place them together, the girl hugged me hard and whispered, "Thank you for believing we're a package." Rick would have liked that line. He liked packages. He liked systems that kept the right things together. Seeing those 2 kids sit side by side in the waiting room hitting each other's knees to make the chairs squeak, I felt something in me finally unclench. Not all at once, but enough to breathe deeper. A year into their sentences, a letter arrived from the women's prison in Kentucky. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Denise wrote that she didn't expect forgiveness. She said she wanted me to know she had always been proud of me, even when she failed at being a mother. I read it twice and put it in a drawer. It stayed there for weeks. I asked Dr. Klein if visiting her would help. She said, It might hurt. Either way, you get to decide." I decided to go once. In the visiting room, Denise looked smaller. The gloss was gone from her hair. The performance was gone from her face. She asked about Ethan. She asked what it was like to run a foundation. She didn't ask for money. She didn't spin. When we stood to leave, she said, "I don't expect to be in your life." I said, "I don't expect you to be." It was not cruel. It was accurate. On the drive back, I rolled the window down and let the air take some of the static in my chest. At a gas station, I bought a map I didn't need. I liked the idea of seeing roads all at once, how one place connects to another if you keep going. We kept Rick's Sunday dinner tradition. We invite people who have carried us and people we are now strong enough to carry. Sometimes the table is full of lawyers and artists. Sometimes it's 2 kids who just met each other again and can't stop smiling with their whole faces. Ethan's art hangs in galleries now. He still keeps a sketchbook under his pillow like a good luck charm. I run the small business security division at Rick's company and spend the rest of my time at the foundation, where the lobby has snacks, a quiet room, and chairs that don't squeak unless you want them to. Family isn't who shows up for the will, it's who shows up for the work. The day my parents walked into that conference room, I thought the story would end with their shame. It didn't. It ended with our choices. If you've had someone reappear when there was something to gain, you're not alone. If you're carrying a story that still shakes when you touch it, I see you. Drop your experience in the comments. Tell me when you decided to build a life that feels like yours. And if this helped you feel a little less alone, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs proof that love can look like stability, that boundaries can be tender, and that sometimes the best revenge is a well-run life.